Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast. We're always talking everything college hoops, even when there's no games on your TV set to watch this weekend for the Final Four and the championship game. Let's all wipe away the tear together. Then let's throw that tissue away. Then let's go wash our hands. You could have been anyone else on the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus, and we appreciate that. Luckily today, we've brought in Adam Jardy. Is going to talk some Ohio State Buckeye basketball. He is the host of the BuckeyeXtraBasketball Podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review his podcast over there on your podcast consumption vehicle of choice. He also writes for the Columbus Dispatch, and please give him a follow on Twitter at Adam Jardy. Capital A, capital J. A for Adam, J for Jardy. I'm going to take a little moment here leading into our conversation with Adam, if that's okay with everybody. During the preseason, I made some Final Four choices for the podcast. We will celebrate some of those selections, and we will make folly of some of those selections as well. Being a UNC fan from day one, picked UNC and thought that Cole Anthony would run roughshod at the point guard position for Coach Williams' run offense, and they still had two bigs that might be useful, interesting, and efficient. It didn't really work out well. I also went off the radar. The radar went all the way to the Ivy League, and we picked Harvard, which is an accurate and appropriate team to talk about for this particular podcast. We'll talk about Seth Towns a little bit later. Yeah, that one didn't work out too great. But the last two picked the Kentucky Wildcats and selected the Ohio State Buckeyes. So let's dive into that particular selection. And before we do, I just wanted to share a story. Luckily, on this podcast, we get to talk to a number of intelligent, insightful, smart, kind people. And one of those people is David Tannenwald, who covers Harvard for Harvard Magazine. David and I were chatting about Seth Towns, and he told me a quote-unquote urban legend story that I'll try to share with you guys here. As you know, Harvard is based in Boston. Jaylen Brown had just gotten drafted by the Celtics. Seth Towns and Jaylen Brown, according to the urban legend, meet up in a gym somewhere in Boston. Location undisclosed. Seth Towns beats Jaylen Brown one-on-one. So the caliber of player that the Buckeyes are receiving on the transfer market with Seth Towns is top shelf. That urban legend definitely holds some truths, maybe not all truths, but some truths. So Buckeye fans, I think you need to be pretty excited about the wing that you're getting. Give a little shout and ahoy, David Tannenwald up there. Hope you're doing well up in Boston, bro. So to the conversation with Adam, we covered a ton of things here. Buckle your seatbelt. We talked about practice habits. We talked about DJ Carton. We talked about CJ Walker's opportunity. Also discussed how tough the Big Ten scout is. Of course, we got into Seth Towns and the transfer there and other transfers that you might need to pay attention to from the West Coast. And the big thing that we talked about was Kaleb Wesson's decision. This has been an ongoing, recurring conversation that we've had with each one of our visits during this team recap series that I've been trying to host for you guys on the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast, is just what is this draft process going to look like and what is it going to present for everybody that's going to quote unquote declare for the draft. It's tough, right? For somebody like Kaleb Wesson, who made an unbelievable amount of improvements on his end, physically, skill-wise, and fitness-wise, you're not going to get the feedback that you would normally get from going to Ports or going to the comp or getting your measurements. None of those things are going to exist. So Adam and I talked about that a little bit as well. We need to end the conversation and put it in the proper place and maybe provide, hopefully, a smile on your face. We just want to give a shout and ahoy over to CBS and the Eye on College Basketball Podcast, Gary Parrish and Matt Nordlander. Matt was nice enough to join us earlier this season as a guest on the podcast, but we talked about Gary Parrish keeping it PG. Thankfully, Adam decided to do that, which was really cool on his end, about asking Coach Holtman and Ohio State's style of play and what that might have done for him emotionally wise. So we hope that you enjoy that part of the conversation towards the tail end. Mike and I are just like all of you out there. We are longing for the Final Four. So we hope that all of you, we hope that all the Buckeye fans, we hope all the people that follow Adam, we hope all the people that listen to the podcast are getting a little something out of this. We hope they're helping on, I know the commutes aren't happening as frequently as in the past. I hope we're helping on a walk around the block, a workout, maybe some chores around the house. Maybe you're cleaning out your basement. I just went through my daughter's closet, got rid of all the small clothes, and we're going to pass those on to our little cousin. Maybe you're doing a task like that around your house and you have the podcast on in the background. I hope that we're providing some sort of smile. And that's really all we're trying to do. So if you're enjoying the smile that you're getting from the podcast and great guests like Adam and all the work that Mike is doing on the tech end, spread a little love. Give the podcast a follow on Twitter at SCS Podcast, Efficiency of Keystrokes, of course. Give Mike a follow on Twitter as well at Randall Rant. Talk about the great work that he's done, pumping out all these conversations for you guys when we're lacking live sports and we can still get some information about all these great teams and all these great seasons, Ohio State included. If you really like what you're listening to, go over to Adam's podcast, give him a follow and give him a kind review on Buckeye Extra Basketball Podcast. And don't be afraid to give us a kind review and maybe not even say anything about us. Maybe say nice things about our guests that we've had on for you the past couple of weeks and what we're trying to do as far as content wise and just paying attention to lack of sports that there is out there to be consumed. Adam was unbelievably kind, unbelievably gracious, and please don't forget to give him a follow at Adam Jardy, capital A, capital J, and please give him a follow with his information over at the Columbus Dispatch. He does an unbelievable job and was unbelievably gracious with us. Cheers, everybody. Please stay safe, and we'll catch up with you before you know it. Welcome in, listeners, to the Screen to Screener College Basketball Podcast, where we're talking everything college hoops, even though there's no college hoops to be played. So we're trying to do a little season recap for everybody, and one of the great seasons that was had this particular college basketball season was by the Ohio State Buckeyes. Thankfully, Adam Jardy has joined us to recap that awesome season by the Buckeyes. Adam, how are things out there?
Things are about the same as I think they probably are everywhere else. Staring at the same walls in my house and making the most out of time with my family. How are you guys?
I think we're probably following a similar script. Thank you so much for hopping back on the podcast. It was a roller coaster ride for the Buckeyes this season. I'll strap on the seatbelt here to go through the ride. After about 10 games, your team looked like the best team in the nation. The metrics love the Buckeyes. They held the number 1 KenPom rating, I think, for a few days. So let's start there. The Buckeyes were rolling. After that legit Penn State win, when the Buckeyes hit the century mark, it was really impressive. Explain the vibe of the team at that point of the season.
It was one of those moments where I think like maybe people were almost afraid to change their clothing, like out of fear that they might jinx something. You know, like when you got a lucky shirt on, you don't want to change it when things are going well. I mean, it seemed like everyone expected that this was going to be a really good Ohio State team and that this was going to be a successful season. But nobody expected 9-0 and like rolling Penn State, rolling North Carolina, rolling Villanova. That was an unexpected start, and you were just kind of looking around at yourselves, at each other, just kind of going, is this really happening? I mean, they were doing things that had never happened before, the way they were beating teams. Expectations at that point, I mean, you went from sort of cautiously optimistic, like, oh, this team could maybe make a tournament run this year, to like, this team could win it all. That's where the expectations were. That's what the vibe was like as you were in those early parts of December.
That sounds just about right. I was kind of on them a little bit early and decided like, okay, this team definitely has the right parts. And that first part of the season, they definitely fit the role and fit the bill as far as like including them in national championship talk. I think the next part we need to talk about, right after Marcus Carr's 35 points in the barn, the speed bump started to hit. We held a little bit tighter onto the seatbelt. And then there was that 4-game slide, dropping 6 out of 7. The holiday break always seems tough to navigate for certain teams and certain programs, and campuses have a different feel with students finishing finals and heading back home. Could you identify what exactly changed for the Buckeyes during that part of the season? Is there something that you can really pin it on?
I think the biggest thing is that this was a really young team, and they came into the season with 4 freshmen, 3 sophomores, and basically all those guys were expected to play significant roles. And so you had a lot of guys that hadn't really been counted on for significant stretches in important moments. When this team is coming off a win against Kentucky right before Christmas, and they're 11-1, they go home for Christmas, I think that they got a little ahead of themselves. And I think looking back in hindsight, you can see this, and I think most of them would agree with it, that the young guys, I think, kind of bought into the hype a little bit. And you saw practice habits starting to slide a little bit. You saw things weren't necessarily at the same level that they needed to be for when real adversity was going to hit. And so when that adversity hit them, like it hit every team in college basketball this year, these guys didn't quite know how to handle it at first. And that's when you saw this losing streak rear its ugly head, and things got pretty tough for them for a little while. But then you saw eventually, we didn't see because practices are closed, but every report was that they started stacking some good practices together, and you saw the upperclassmen and the few older guys in this roster started to emerge as those guys that could lead and that could pull the team through something like this. Once they got it kind of turned around a little bit, they got really hot, and they were looking really, really tough by the time everything was canceled.
It seemed like they did recapture a little bit of that early season magic, as you spoke of, once their practice habits improved and once they got kind of the ship righted, for lack of a better term. And one of the changes that I think we might need to talk about, we have to ask about DJ Carton, his transfer / away decision. For one, I guess, did the time away help him find further health, calm, and wellness? And, Carton was one of the true impact freshmen with like serious wiggle to his game. How the Buckeye staff help DJ, find solutions and then also fill the void in the rotation.
Yeah, I guess I'll take the first part of that first. I think that the time away definitely helped him. I think it kind of became clear the longer that this process went on that it was more and more unlikely he was going to return to Ohio State. Like the issues that he was dealing with, and I don't know like intimate specifics about them, but I do know these were legitimate, significant issues that he was dealing with, and some of this was stuff that he had already been dealing with before he got to Ohio State. And then it got more pronounced the longer that he was there. And so it's not like something that just popped up because he was upset at Ohio State or anything like that. Like these were deep-seated things he's been dealing with for a while. So I do think that the time away and the chance to kind of clear his head, I'm sure has helped. I don't know what his next step ultimately will be. I'm sure it will be somewhere that he feels he can get his mental issues to where he can be the player he knows that he can be, and where he can just feel good about himself again and feel safe and feel comfortable. I don't know where that fit ultimately will be, and it'll be hard for him right now because he can't go visit these places. So I don't know what the next step is for him. But with Ohio State then suddenly having to grapple with him being out, I think it sort of refocused a few guys. I think there was a little bit something to the fact that, like, I don't like to use football analogies to explain basketball, but I just keep thinking that, they say when you have two quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback. And I felt like this team had 2 point guards, so it didn't really have a point guard. It was DJ was splitting time with CJ Walker pretty evenly, and they were starting to move DJ off the ball a little bit to where they wanted him to be an off guard, maybe let him use his decisive, or let him be a scorer, let him create some things. Be a little bit more reactive instead of having to read defenses all the time. They were starting to move him off the ball a little bit. And then once he was gone, CJ Walker, his game elevated significantly. And you could just see the level of confidence he was playing with just changed. And it became, in a lot of ways, CJ's team. And then the other guards that they had, and Dwayne Washington, Luther Muhammad, they stepped up. Their games came around. They played better minutes, longer minutes. They shot better. I just think that, there's something to be said when your back is against the wall and you're missing a guy that everyone's got to kind of chip in. And I think those guys rose to that occasion.
Well, I think that speaks to the roster makeup and also to the coaching staff of actually, solving a real problem in season. And we always talk about maybe halftime adjustments or timeout adjustments, or, what the efficiency of teams is coming out of timeouts. Maybe we need to evaluate the efficiency of Ohio State coming out of that slump and then coming out the other end, looking like the team that they were during the beginning of the season. That was a nice job by the roster and the coaching staff. And part of that, part of what contributed to that losing streak is the real grind that is the Big Ten schedule. Adam, you ride those roads. Just how tough is the travel in the robust Big Ten slate? And I guess, another two-part question here. How dominant were the home teams this season in your conference? And then how much did the expanded Big Ten schedule help the conference on the whole as far as metrics, net numbers, and potential March invites, with just about every game being a quad one opportunity?
Yeah, that was huge. And I have to give some credit to the league for being kind of forward thinking as far as trying to get as many teams in the dance as it could and deciding to move to a 20-game schedule when they did, because you got to a point where once you got into conference play and the Big Ten had done well in the non-conference and some teams were already ranked well, then they were just going to play each other. And that just kept those rankings high. Just across the board. So yeah, it was a tough league to go through this season. And you can use any different metric or statistic that you want to back it up. I really think it would have been a year where we'd have gotten into the tournament, because one of the talking points was that, well, it's a really tough league, but how many teams are actually going to win in March? And I think a lot of them would have, because I think the league or the level of scouting in the Big Ten is incredibly high, as I'm sure it is in every conference. But like, teams know what you're going to run. They know your counter. They know the counter to the counter. And especially as you get deeper into the season, like just the chess match gets more and more pronounced. And I feel like that had Big Ten teams ready to go play somebody else And I just felt like there were a lot of teams that once they got the chance to go play somebody from another conference, you were going to see a lot of teams, win a game, 2 games, make the Sweet 16. I thought that's where the Big Ten was headed this year. As far as like Ohio State on the road this year, I mean, they had a few big wins. I mean, the win at Michigan was huge for them. Otherwise, I mean, they kind of struggled. I mean, they picked off Northwestern on the road. They picked off Nebraska on the road. But those are games that you should win. It was tough. They had some issues, and their offensive efficiency numbers would show that when they went on the road. They just weren't as good. But that didn't necessarily make them stand out in the Big Ten. There weren't a lot of teams aside from Wisconsin there weren't a lot of teams that did very well on the road this year for sure.
Yeah, it seemed like the home team and the home program, like that was a definite betting trend, if nothing else, inside the Big Ten. And speaking of opportunity, let's bust out the crystal ball a little bit. Ohio State was sitting anywhere from a 4 seed to a 7 seed, depending on what type of projections, and you could still add in the Big Ten tourney results, into all those equations. What kind of damage could this squad do in March? Could this team recapture that early season success and look like one of the best teams in the nation and be a true Final Four threat? Or would they be on the other side and be on the upset alert as a 4 or 5 seed, say, against like a Liberty or Vermont? What was the feel heading into for the Buckeyes?
Yeah, I was not worried about this team being an early out. I really felt that being around this team, and I wrote some things on this. Some of it's just a vibe that you got from being there for every interview and being at every game. Like, this team, you go from, you had some injuries throughout the year. You had DJ leave. Alonzo Gaffney was gone for the last couple of games. Like, they had adversity this season. They had some things that really tested them. And by the end of the season, they had come out on a good side of that. And they really genuinely believed that they had a good run in them. And whether that a good run means they were going to reach the Sweet 16, I spoke with CJ Walker yesterday for a story that I'm writing, who will be a senior next year. But, I mean, he said that they believed that they had it in their capabilities to reach a Final Four. Every team can say that because we'll never know who is going to get there. But there was a significant confidence level with this team that they were ready to make some noise. And I haven't felt that level of confidence around Ohio State basketball in a long time. I think it would have been a fun March for them. I think they would have surprised a few people. The loss of Carton, I think, ultimately lowered the ceiling a little bit, because I think you need a player with those kinds of capabilities if you want to knock off a 1 seed in the Sweet 16 or something like that. But I still think they could have made some noise. I think they had an upset or two in them, and I definitely think they would have been, in a Sweet 16, against a really good team, knocking on a door for an Elite Eight or a Final Four.
Ohio State fans have to feel good with you saying that, and even if the opportunity didn't exist in real life. All right, so your Buckeyes got some good news on the transfer market. Former Harvard wingman Seth Towns decided to come back home, and he's a rare grad transfer with 2 years of eligibility, hopefully, left to play. He's a former Ivy League Player of the Year, shot at 44% from 3 during his last healthy season. He might be the best grad transfer in the portal. What a get. How do you feel Towns is going to fit in as a Buckeye?
Yeah, the only concern, the only sort of qualifier in all of that is that he hasn't played in 2 years. So he's been dealing with some knee injuries. Since he was the Ivy League Player of the Year 3 seasons ago, he hasn't played. When I spoke with him when he committed, he said that he's on track to be on the court and full go come June. You have to hope that he can get back to the form that he had before, because if he can, I mean, it's a dude who's a 15-point a game scorer who can shoot 44, 46% from 3. I mean, he gives you size, he gives you length, he's a really, really smart dude. He's got a great basketball IQ. You plug him in on the wing, and you start looking down the roster at they could go from the 2 to the 5, basically 6'5", 6'6", 6'6", 6'7", 6'8". They've got some length, they've got some height, they've got some athleticism. It's a big pickup for them. And then you add in the fact, he's a Columbus kid. He's from Northland High School, where Jared Sullinger went. He's Northland's all-time leading scorer. It means the world to Seth Towns to get the opportunity to play at Ohio State. There's a picture that he's posted recently. There's a painting on his wall from when he was just a little kid of him in an Ohio State basketball jersey dunking a ball. So this has always been a special place for him. And for him to have this opportunity to come back, finish out his college career in his hometown, you're going to have a motivated guy, and you're going to have a guy who's got some rust to knock off, but there's a lot of upside and a lot of reasons why Ohio State was really excited to get him.
You add him to what you have returning with EJ Liddell. You mentioned Gaffney before. You're going to bring a whole bunch of guards back. This team looks like a small ball NBA team. You mentioned the length that's going to be across the roster and the possible starting lineup. The coaching staff and the fan base have reason to smile for next season, right, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting team. And I mean, the big question, the big looming issue about the team next season is what Kaleb Wesson might do. I wrote that I spoke with his dad, and Kaleb he put out an announcement today echoing what his dad told me yesterday, that he's declared for the draft. He's going to hire an agent because you're allowed to do that, but he's keeping his eligibility intact. It's going to be very, very interesting what he ends up being able to do, because we don't know what the draft process is going to look like. We don't know if there's going to be a draft, and we don't know how that will impact guys with eligibility. If you go down that road and the NBA says, oh, there's no draft until August, what do you do to all these underclassmen? Like there are so many unknowns right now that I would have said that if in a normal season, if Ohio State had gotten into the tournament, made a run, I would say Kaleb was gone. Like the writing was pretty much on the wall. But I think that now it looks more likely or I don't want to say more likely, there's a chance that he comes back, whereas I didn't think there was much of a chance before. So if you look at this roster with Kaleb Wesson next season, I mean, they become a Big Ten favorite. I think that they're definitely a top 10 team, possibly a top 5 team. They will be experienced. They'll be big. They'll have athleticism. There's a lot to like about an Ohio State roster with Kaleb Wesson next year. Now, having said that, if he's not there, you're right. They're going to have to play smaller lineups. And that's where a guy like Seth Towns comes in. Justice Suing, who's a transfer from Cal, who sat out this past year, but was Cal's leading scorer 2 years ago, one of the best in the nation at getting to the line. You know, you look at a lineup where you've got like those two guys on the court, EJ Liddell, who really blossomed down the stretch and is going to be a force in the Big Ten. Like you have those guys, you have Kyle Young at center. He's not a traditional center, but when you look at having 4 guys on the court that are all 6'6" to 6'8", you know, you kind of maybe you make up for what you don't have with Kaleb. But there is a lot to like about this roster next season, whether or not Kaleb comes back. And I think most of it is the fact that it's an older roster. You're going to have dudes who have been through battles, who have been on the roster, who know what you need to do to win at this level. It's going to be an experienced team, and that's not something we've seen at Ohio State in quite some time.
One of the things that we hear coaches say all the time is they have to get older. We need some experience, and that's why the grad transfer market and the transfer portal itself is always so valuable, because you do have guys that have that experience. And you mentioned a couple of those players that are going to exist on the Buckeye roster for next season. If Kaleb comes back, I mean, that you're absolutely accurate with your top 5 preseason ranking. I think that'd be completely, on board with what would be realistic and super high expectations. All right, let's get you out of here on this, Adam. Let's provide some college hoops comic relief. Please share the highlights from the press conference that you had with Coach Holtman when you referred to fellow college basketball podcast host Gary Parrish and his thoughts on Ohio State's style of play. This is a great moment that maybe people outside of Columbus might not know. So let's get you out of here with a laugh.
Yeah, so, press conferences can get pretty dry every once in a while. Sometimes you just need to spice it up a little bit. And so when Ohio State was playing at just an incredible level early in the season, Gary Parrish on the CBS College Basketball Podcast, which is like your podcast, a fantastic podcast. I listen all the time. And he had made some over-the-top references to how much he enjoyed watching Ohio State's offense and how physically attracted he was to the Buckeyes. And it was pretty humorous. And so I brought it up to Holtman at the end of a press conference and I asked if he had heard it. And he said he had not. And he said he was going to check into it. He said, well, can you tell me what he said? And I said, no, I can't say that out loud right now. You'll just have to go listen. It was not PG, let's put it that way. But yeah, it was pretty great, and it got a good laugh from everybody. You got to have those moments in the course of a long season, and Holtman's pretty good at embracing that and enjoying it. Well,
listeners, if you don't know what we're talking about, we highly suggest that this is well worth your time to go research. Adam absolutely killed it, and we just want to give an ahoy and a shout over to the CBS crew as well. Those guys do an unbelievable job with their podcast. All right, Adam, thanks very much. We'll get you out of here with one quick question.
Sure.
Let's go across the nation. Who's the one player in the nation that you saw, whether it be Big Ten or otherwise, that you would trust with a last-second possession with the game on the line?
Ooh, one guy that I would trust. I mean, the obvious one is like Cassius Winston, but given that I watched him do it to Ohio State, at Ohio State, I might have to go with Marcus Carr from Minnesota. Just because, I mean, I watched him, Ohio State had a lead with like a minute and a half to go in that game, and then they lost it, and Minnesota came down, and Carr hits a 3-pointer basically at the buzzer to beat Ohio State at Ohio State. I mean, that guy's experienced, that guy had been through it, and to do that on the road against a team that was playing as well as Ohio State was playing, that's just a very small sample size, but it's easy to say Cassius Winston, but because I watched Marcus Carr do it in front of my own eyes, I might go with him.
I don't think that's a bad call. I remember watching that as well, and I was just thinking, like, just how good is Marcus Carr in late game situations?
Dagger.
We can put him up, Crutcher or Pritchard, whoever. Like, it seemed like he's that type of player. Hey, Adam, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast, giving us a little time. Hope that your ears are finding some oasis somewhere out there. And cheers to lots of guys. Please stay safe out there, Adam.
Yeah, you guys too. Thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me talk to someone that doesn't live in my house. It's good to speak to the outside world. So thank you guys, and you guys stay safe.
All right, will do, Adam. Many thanks. Cheers.
Thanks.